The fluorescent lights of St. Jude's seemed to hum louder than usual tonight, buzzing with an almost malicious glee as I pushed my cart down the sterile hallway. Another 12-hour shift was grinding to a close, my feet aching, my mind a blur of medication dosages, patient charts, and the lingering scent of antiseptic. For 25 years, nursing wasn't just a job. It was my bedrock, my sanctuary, and the engine that kept my small family running. It had paid for the modest house in the suburbs, the worn but reliable minivan, and, most importantly, Stacy's tuition. Stacy, my daughter, my world. Tonight, the thought of her wasn't the comforting balm it usually was. Instead, it was a slow, simmering ache beneath the surface of my exhaustion, a discordant note in the quiet symphony of my thoughts. Just a few months ago, I had pictured this moment with a different kind of anticipation, the quiet hum of an empty nest, maybe a little extra sleep, perhaps even enough time to finally tackle that pile of classic novels I'd been hoarding. Stacy had graduated, magna cum laude, with a degree in communications. My girl, walking across that stage, cap and gown a vibrant blur of promise. It was supposed to be the beginning of her independence, and, by extension, mine. But the silence in my house these days wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating quiet of unspoken disappointment, the polite, strained pauses in conversation, the subtle shifting of responsibility. I clocked out, the sharp click of the time card machine, a small victory. The drive home was a familiar route, the streetlights blurring into streaks of light against the inky blackness. My subdivision, with its cookie-cutter houses and manicured lawns, usually offered a sense of comforting normalcy. Tonight, it felt like a waiting room. The porch light was off. Of course, Stacy rarely remembered to turn it on, even though I reminded her every single night. I fumbled with my keys, the metal cold against my numb fingers, and let myself into the silent house. The air was thick with the scent of microwaved popcorn and something vaguely sweet, probably the expensive flavored coffee Stacy insisted on buying. No lingering aroma of a home-cooked meal, no sound of the TV, no telltale glow from the living room. Just silence. I walked into the living room, my gaze immediately drawn to the large, worn sofa. There she was, Stacy, curled up under a plush throw blanket, the faint glow of her phone illuminating her face. Her blonde hair, usually meticulously styled, was a tangled mess around her head. Her face, still holding the soft roundness of youth, was devoid of the bright-eyed optimism I'd seen on graduation day. She looked lost. "Stacy?" I asked, my voice tired, a little too soft. She startled, dropping her phone, which landed with a soft thud on the carpet. "Mom, you're home. Didn't hear you come in." Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. "I imagine not. You're probably too engrossed in whatever's on that phone." I sighed, pushing away the automatic criticism. What was the point? Stacy sighed, pushing herself up, her blanket pooling around her. "I was just looking for jobs." The lie hung in the air, thin and transparent. Her phone was open to a celebrity gossip site, not a job board. I knew it. She knew I knew it. "Any luck?" I asked, crossing my arms, trying to keep my voice neutral. My hope, which had flared so brightly when she first started applying, was now a dim flicker. She slumped. "It's just so hard, Mom. Everyone wants 5 years of experience for an entry-level job. And the interviews? They're awful. Everyone's so competitive. It's like a meat grinder out there." She ran a hand through her hair, a gesture of exasperated defeat. "I just don't think I'm cut out for the corporate grind, you know?" My heart, already weary, sank a little further. "What does that mean, Stacy?" I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. She avoided my gaze, picking at a loose thread on the blanket. It means I just don't think I'm going to work. Not right now, anyway. Maybe later, when the market's better, or when I figure out what I really want to do. She finally looked at me, her big blue eyes, so much like Robert's, pleading, "Can I just stay here for a while, Mom? Until I figure things out? You know, like a boomerang kid?" The term, so trendy, so casual, felt like a punch to my stomach. A boomerang kid, my daughter, 22 years old with a college degree, and she was declaring herself retired before she even started. My dream of an empty nest, of a little peace, of finally having some breathing room, wavered. I had envisioned her setting off on her own, finding her path, blossoming. Instead, she was retreating, shrinking back into the comfort of my home, into the suffocating reality of a spoiled, demanding adult child. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This wasn't what I'd planned, not what I'd hoped for. But she was my daughter. She was scared, and the job market was tough. I remembered my own struggles, fresh out of nursing school, the endless applications, the fear of not making it. "Okay," I said, the word coming out softer than I intended, laced with a weariness I couldn't quite hide. "Okay, Stacy, you can stay for a while, but you need to keep looking for jobs, and you need to help out around here." A flicker of relief and something else, triumph, crossed her face. "Oh, thank you, Mom. You're the best. I will, I promise. I'll look every day." She scrambled up, throwing her arms around me. Her hug was warm, but it felt hollow, a temporary reprieve. I hugged her back, patting her hair. The familiar weight of her in my arms, once a comfort, now felt heavy, a burden I hadn't anticipated. My dream of an empty nest had dissolved, replaced by the suffocating reality of a demanding presence. I looked over her shoulder at the faint glow of her phone on the carpet, already knowing her promise to look every day would fade with the morning light. A cold premonition settled in my gut. This wasn't just a temporary setback. This was the beginning of something much, much harder. The quiet life I craved, the peace I deserved, was now further away than ever. And I had just opened the door wide to let the complications walk right in. The promise of just for a while quickly dissolved into the suffocating reality of a permanent fixture. Days blurred into weeks, then months, each passing one adding another layer to the subtle, agonizing torment that had become my home life. Stacy was there, always there, a constant, demanding presence that chipped away at my peace, my finances, and ultimately, my spirit. I continued my grueling 12-hour shifts at St. Jude's. The familiar hum of the hospital, the controlled chaos of the ER, the quiet dignity of my patients. It was all a welcome escape. I'd often volunteer for extra overtime, not just for the money, but for the precious hours away from the house. Those extra shifts meant more time on my feet, more aching muscles, but also more time where I didn't have to witness the slow erosion of my daughter's ambition, or the casual, entitled disregard for my sacrifices. The financial strain became immense. My modest nurse's salary, once sufficient for a single mother raising a child, was now stretched thinner than old gauze. Every extra hour, every missed lunch break, every penny saved, was swallowed by Stacy's silent, ravenous consumption. Her days were a stark contrast to mine. While I was managing IV drips and responding to emergency codes, Stacy was lounging on the sofa, the soft glow of her phone screen illuminating her face, scrolling through endless feeds of perfect lives and unattainable luxuries. The sound of her laughter, often directed at some trivial meme, grated on my nerves. The takeout containers began to pile up in the kitchen trash. Sushi, gourmet burgers, artisanal pizzas. Stacy had always been a picky eater, but now anything I cooked, Anything that required actual effort and wasn't ordered from an app was met with a dismissive wrinkle of her nose. Mom, you know I don't like frozen lasagna, she'd say, as if I had personally offended her culinary sensibilities. Can't we just get Chinese? The subtle disdain escalated into outright demands. She scoffed at the clothes I brought home from discount stores, the practical, durable items that were within my budget. Seriously, Mom? Target? Everyone at the gym wears Lululemon now. You want me to look like a charity case? Her voice, dripping with casual cruelty, stung more than any burn from a hot, sterile tray. I'd tried to explain patiently at first, then with increasing exasperation. Stacy, honey, Lululemon is expensive, and I'm working extra shifts just to cover the basics. We can't afford designer clothes right now. Her eyes would roll, a heavy sigh. But Brittany's mom buys her everything, and Brittany's not even working yet. Why can't you be more like Brittany's mom, Mom? She buys her all the latest stuff. Brittany's mom. The ghost of Brittany's perfect, wealthy mother haunted our conversations. A constant, insidious comparison. Brittany, with her trust fund and her perfect internships, her endless stream of designer handbags, and spontaneous trips to Tulum. Stacy held up a glossy ad for a designer handbag once, her fingers tracing the supple leather. This is what I mean, Mom. This is what everyone has. The comment, a cruel, thoughtless jab at my endless sacrifices, hit me with a force that stole my breath. It wasn't just a demand for a bag, it was a wholesale rejection of my life, my values, my tireless effort. It was a slap in the face, a dismissal of every call bell answered, every life saved, every hour I had spent away from her, working to give her a chance at a better life. I stood there in the middle of my small living room, the scent of her expensive flavored coffee thick in the air, and suddenly something in me snapped. The years of quiet resentment, the simmering frustration, the unspoken fear of what she was becoming. It all coalesced into a molten core of pure, incandescent fury. My hands clenched at my sides, trembling. You want to know why I can't be like Brittany's mom, Stacy? My voice was low, dangerously quiet, the kind of quiet that precedes a storm. Because Brittany's mom probably isn't working herself into the ground as a nurse just to keep a roof over her head and food on the table for an ungrateful, entitled adult child. Stacy recoiled, her eyes wide with shock. She'd never seen me like this. My anger was usually a contained simmer, never a full boil. Mom, what are you talking about? I'm not ungrateful. Oh, really? I retorted, my voice rising, the dam finally breaking. You think lounging on the couch all day, ordering in and complaining about the food I cook is gratitude? You think scoffing at the clothes I buy you, clothes I work for, is gratitude? You think comparing me to some imaginary perfect parent who apparently has an endless supply of money is gratitude? I was shouting now, my voice hoarse, raw with years of pent-up emotion. Stacy's face twisted. I'm just saying, no. I cut her off, my hand slamming down on the armrest of the worn sofa. You're not just saying. You're being a spoiled, demanding, utterly useless individual who thinks the world owes her everything because she managed to get a piece of paper that apparently means nothing to her. I poured my life into you, Stacy. Every extra shift, every PTA meeting, every penny saved was for your future, not for you to sit on your rear end and drain me dry. Tears welled up in Stacy's eyes, but I saw no genuine remorse, only shock and wounded pride. How can you say that? I'm your daughter. You're supposed to support me. Support you? I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping me. I am supporting you. I'm supporting your expensive habits, your endless idleness, and your delusion that life is some kind of free ride. What about my support, Stacy? What about my peace? What about the independence I dreamed of when you graduated? The words hung in the air, sharp and brutal. The realization hit me then, not as a subtle insight, but as a physical blow that left me gasping for air. It wasn't just her fault, it was mine. My unconditional love, my endless sacrifices, my desperate desire to give her everything I never had. It had inadvertently fostered this monstrous sense of entitlement. I hadn't raised a responsible, independent adult. I had raised a burden, a dependent, a parasite. I had mistaken indulgence for love, and now we were both paying the price. My anger, a raw primal scream in my chest, momentarily eclipsed my exhaustion. How could I have been so blind, so foolish? I had tried to build her wings, but instead I had crippled her, leaving her utterly dependent on me while I withered away, working myself into an early grave. The picture of my hopeful empty nest, filled instead by a demanding adult child, festered in my mind, a grotesque distortion of my dreams. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a shaky breath, trying to regain control. When I opened them, the anger had solidified into a cold, hard resolve. No more. This was it. The line. "Get up, Stacy," I said, my voice low, dangerously quiet, a complete contrast to my previous outburst. The sudden shift in my tone made her eyes widen, a flicker of genuine fear finally crossing her face. "Mom," she began, but I cut her off. "Get up, go to your room, and tomorrow morning, things are going to be very different indeed. This is no longer a free ride. This is no longer my problem." She scrambled to her feet, gathering the blanket around her, her face a mixture of confusion, resentment, and a growing sense of unease. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "You'll find out," I said, my voice hardening, the cold resolve a steady flame in my chest. "Tomorrow, you'll find out what it means to be truly independent. Because I'm done, Stacy. I'm done paying for your choices. I'm done enabling your destruction. And for the first time in your life, you're going to learn what it means to stand on your own 2 feet without me propping you up." She stared at me, her mouth slightly agape, clearly shocked by the ferocity in my voice, by the unyielding resolve in my eyes. The warmth of the room suddenly felt frigid, replaced by an icy tension. My dream of an empty nest had dissolved, but a new, starker reality had emerged. This was no longer about gentle nudges or patient encouragement. This was about a fight, a battle for my own sanity and for what was left of my daughter's future. And I, Laura, the tired nurse, was finally ready to draw the line. The time for tough love had arrived, and it would be very tough. My rage simmered, a cold, hard knot in my stomach, long after Stacy had flounced off to her room. The silence she left behind wasn't peaceful. It was the quiet of a fuse burning, inching closer to the dynamite. I wasn't just tired anymore. I was beyond that. I was furious, furious at her entitlement, furious at myself for enabling it, and determined to teach her a lesson that no college degree could ever impart. This wasn't about punishment, it was about survival, both hers and, frankly, mine. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the glow in the dark stars Stacy had stuck there when she was 8 years old, mocking me with their faded cheer. Sleep wouldn't come. My mind raced, meticulously outlining the new rules, steeling myself for the inevitable backlash. I had to be strong, stronger than I'd ever been. This was it, the line in the sand. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, but the atmosphere in our small house was thick with unspoken tension. I was up before Stacy, methodically preparing my own modest breakfast: oatmeal, black coffee, no bacon, no fancy pastries. When Stacy finally stumbled into the kitchen, hair askew, eyes still puffy from sleep, She sniffed the air, looking for the usual aroma of my weekend pancakes. Morning, Mom, she mumbled, stretching. Something smells plain. Are you making breakfast? I looked up from my bowl, my gaze steady, unwavering. I'm making my breakfast, Stacy. She frowned, confusion flickering in her eyes. Oh, so, no pancakes? No pancakes, I confirmed, taking a slow sip of coffee. And no, I'm not making breakfast for you. From now on, you're responsible for your own meals and your own groceries. Her jaw dropped. What? Mom, that's ridiculous. You always cook. Not anymore, I stated, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. From this morning forward, the Laura's all-inclusive meal plan is officially canceled. You want to eat, you buy the food, you cook it, or you go hungry. Her face flushed, a mixture of disbelief and indignation. But, but I don't have any money. Which brings me to my next point. I placed my coffee mug down, the clink echoing in the sudden silence. Your allowance is cut to a bare minimum, enough for basic groceries, perhaps a bus fare if you have an interview, and that's it. No more discretionary spending, no more expensive takeout, no more frivolous shopping. Stacy's eyes widened, her face contorting in a mask of outrage. You can't be serious. Mom, what are you talking about? How am I supposed to live? You'll learn, I said, meeting her furious gaze. You'll learn to manage just like every other adult in this country who works for a living. You have a degree, Stacy. Use that brain. Figure it out. Her protests escalated, her voice rising to a shrill whine. This is insane. You're just trying to punish me. This isn't fair. I just graduated. I'm supposed to be enjoying my life. Enjoying your life on my dime, you mean? I countered, my voice still dangerously calm. That's where the enjoyment ends. Your allowance ends. My cooking ends. And speaking of things ending, I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. The maid service is also officially terminated. Your room is your responsibility. Your laundry is your responsibility. Anything you leave out, anything you mess up, that's on you. Stacy looked horrified. Her room, which had been a disaster zone since high school, now remained untouched, a testament to her utter reliance on my unspoken labor. You're not gonna clean my room? Mom, that's disgusting. Then clean it yourself, I said, picking up my empty bowl. You're a grown woman. It's time you started acting like one. The argument continued, a torrent of accusations and complaints from Stacy, met by my resolute silence. I became a mask of stone. My face showed no anger, no pity, no room for negotiation. This wasn't anger anymore. It was a desperate act of tough love, a calculated surgery to excise the parasitic growth of entitlement. The next few days were a living hell. Stacy raged. She pleaded. She tried every manipulation tactic in her arsenal. She attempted the silent treatment, stomping around the house, slamming doors, leaving her dirty dishes in the sink, hoping I'd cave. I didn't. The dirty dishes remained. Her laundry piled up in the hall. Her room became a biohazard zone, smelling faintly of stale pizza and unwashed clothes. I moved through the house like a ghost, attending to my own needs, preparing my own meals, doing my own laundry. When I cooked for myself, I made just enough for one, and if she asked for a bite, I simply said, "That's mine. You should have cooked for yourself." She tried to invite friends over, perhaps hoping their presence would shame me into submission. They'd arrive, expecting the usual free snacks and lax atmosphere, only to find a tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. I offered them no hospitality, barely acknowledged their presence, focusing on my own tasks. The subtle, unspoken message was clear. This was not a free hotel. Her friends quickly stopped coming around. The late-night rule became a particularly bitter point of contention. Stacy had always been a night owl, staying out with friends until the early hours, knowing I'd wait up, or at least leave the door unlocked. Not anymore. The first time she came home after 11 p.m., I was already asleep. She tried her key, fumbled with the lock, then knocked. Softly at first, then harder. Finally, a frantic pounding. I lay in my bed, heart hammering, listening. Every maternal instinct screamed at me to go open the door, to make sure she was safe. But I fought it. I pictured Robert's weary face, the sacrifices, the insults. I pictured the empty space in my budget. I pictured her entitlement, festering like an untreated wound. The pounding continued for a long time, then faded. I heard the distant sound of a car door slamming, then silence. The next morning, Stacy arrived home, her eyes bloodshot, her hair even messier than usual. She looked exhausted, defeated. "Mom, how could you? I had to sleep in Brittany's car. It was freezing," she shrieked, her voice hoarse. "Next time, make sure you're home before 11, I said, not looking up from my newspaper. "Those are the house rules now. I work hard, Stacy. I need my sleep. And I'm not running a hotel." "But what if something happened to me?" she cried, tears finally streaming down her face. I put down the newspaper, my gaze steady. "Then you'd learn a very harsh lesson about personal responsibility, wouldn't you? Life doesn't come with a safety net, Stacy. You have to create your own." Her tears turned to sobs of pure frustration. She hated me. I could see it in her eyes. And for the first time, I didn't care. The guilt, once a crippling weight, was slowly lifting, replaced by a sense of righteous purpose. This wasn't hate. This was tough love. This was survival. The tension in the house was a palpable entity, a constant suffocating shadow. There was no laughter, no casual chatter, only the strained silence of unspoken resentment and simmering defiance. Stacy tried to go on strike, refusing to do anything, spending her days locked in her room, emerging only to grab a snack or order takeout. But with her allowance cut and no cooking from me, the takeout orders dwindled. Her phone bill went unpaid. Her data ran out. She was slowly, painfully, being forced to confront the reality of her self-imposed helplessness. I continued my routine, unfazed. I went to work, came home, cooked my own meals, kept my own space meticulously clean. I worked out in the evenings, found solace in a good book, and indulged in a glass of wine, something I rarely did when I was constantly worried about Stacy. My own life, though still solitary, was regaining a sense of order, of peace. The house, once a chaotic battleground, now felt calmer, even with her silent, sulking presence. One evening, I came home to find the kitchen sink empty. My dirty coffee mug, which I had deliberately left there, was gone. And then I saw it. Stacy's room door, usually perpetually ajar, revealing a mountain of clothes and trash, was closed. And from behind it, I heard a faint whirring sound. The vacuum cleaner, a strange sensation, a flicker of something akin to surprise, ran through me. It was small, so incredibly small, but it was something. A crack in the wall of defiance. I didn't say anything. I just smiled, a faint, almost imperceptible curve of my lips. The silence that followed wasn't an absence of love, but the agonizing quiet of a lesson being learned. And for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, my daughter would finally choose to truly grow up. The battle was far from over, but the first shot had been fired, and the silent war had begun to turn. The vacuum cleaner hummed faintly from Stacy's room that evening, a small, tentative sound that barely pierced the thick silence in the house. My coffee mug was gone from the sink, a tiny, almost imperceptible victory. I didn't acknowledge it. I didn't praise her. I just continued with my own routine, a quiet, unwavering presence. The silence wasn't about love anymore or disappointment. It was a battleground, and I was holding my ground. The real change, the brutal shift, began the very next day. Without a steady flow of cash, and with my steadfast refusal to cater to her every whim, the reality of her situation hit Stacy with the force of a wrecking ball. The illusion of her boomerang kid life, built on my endless sacrifice, crumbled fast. Breakfast was a solitary affair for me. Oatmeal, black coffee, the aroma of gourmet pastries was a distant memory. Stacy, usually stumbling in with a mumbled demand for bacon, now just shuffled into the kitchen, eyeing my meager meal with a hungry, resentful stare. She made herself a bowl of cold cereal, her motions slow and heavy. That was the beginning of her personal hunger games. Her friends, the ones who had always been accustomed to her lavish spending, her impulsive shopping sprees, and the endless stream of expensive takeout, quickly began to drift away. I'd hear her on the phone, her voice growing increasingly desperate, trying to cajole them into meeting up, promising to pay them back later. But later never came. I watched from the living room one afternoon as she pleaded with Brittany on FaceTime, her voice bordering on a whine. Brittany, I gathered, was off to Tulum again, flaunting a new designer bikini. Stacy ended the call abruptly, her face a thundercloud. The friendships, built on convenience and freebies, withered without the sunshine of my hard-earned cash. The takeout apps on her phone became a cruel torment. She'd scroll through them, her finger hovering over tempting images of pizza and sushi, knowing she couldn't order anything. The smell of my simple home-cooked meals, a chicken breast with steamed vegetables, a hearty lentil soup, began to drive her mad. I cooked just enough for myself, carefully portioned, deliberately making sure there were no leftovers for her to sneak. I could feel her eyes on me as I ate, a simmering resentment mixed with a growing, undeniable hunger. Mom, she'd try, her voice strained. That soup smells really good. Can I just have a little bit? You should have cooked for yourself, Stacy, I'd reply, my voice flat, keeping my gaze on my plate. I made enough for one. Her protests, once loud and theatrical, dwindled into muttered complaints, then sullen silence. The energy required for a full-blown tantrum seemed to drain out of her with every missed meal. She started looking gaunt, shadows deepening under her eyes. The designer clothes she insisted on wearing, once pristine, now looked rumpled and unkempt. She wasn't just hungry for food. She was hungry for the comfort and ease she'd always taken for granted. Her room remained a disaster zone, a monument to her defiance. I'd walk past it, the faint odor of stale clothes and unwashed sheets wafting out, but I didn't touch it. I didn't offer to clean it. It was her problem now, a tangible reminder of her lost maid service. Her laundry piled up by the washing machine, then spread onto the floor of her bathroom until she was down to her last clean outfit. I watched, a quiet observer, as she finally, grudgingly, dragged a basket of clothes into the laundry room, her face a mask of furious humiliation. The late-night rule became her particular nemesis. After the first night she was locked out, she tried coming home earlier, but old habits die hard. There were two more instances where she arrived after 11 p.m., frantic knocking followed by frustrated shouts. I'd lie awake, listening, my heart aching with a conflicting cocktail of fear for her safety and unwavering resolve. Each time she'd end up crashing at a friend's place, or, as I later learned from one of her exasperated friends, sleeping in her car. The mornings after were always the same. She'd come home, eyes bloodshot, hair wild, looking like a drowned rat. Mom, you left me out again. It was freezing. I almost got jumped. life out there is tough when you have no resources, Stacy, I'd reply, my voice calm, devoid of any sympathy. Maybe that's a lesson worth learning. The doors lock at 11. That's the rule. Your choice. Her anger, once volatile, was now tinged with a desperate edge. She'd tried everything: begging, pleading, silent treatment, emotional blackmail. Nothing worked. My face was a mask of stone, my resolve unbreakable. I wasn't her friend, her enabler, or her personal ATM anymore. I was simply Laura, the boundary setter, the one who refused to be consumed. One scorching afternoon, the kind of stifling summer day that made the asphalt shimmer, Stacy stormed into the living room. Her hair was limp, her face flushed, her eyes blazing with a mixture of defiance and desperation I hadn't seen before. "I can't do this anymore, Mom," she shrieked, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "This is unbearable. You're making my life a living hell." I looked up from my book, a novel I was actually enjoying for the first time in months. "No, Stacy," I said, my voice quiet. "You're making your own life a living hell. I'm just stopping myself from enabling it. No, this isn't fair. I hate this. I hate you," she screamed, her voice cracking. Her face was contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "I'm leaving. I'm getting out of here. I'll show you. I don't need you." My heart gave a sharp pang. A part of me, the old Laura, the nurturing mother, wanted to reach out, to soothe her, to stop her from making a terrible mistake. But the new Laura, the one forged in the fire of Robert's passing and Stacy's entitlement, held firm. This was it, the ultimate test. "Okay, Stacy," I said, my voice even, devoid of emotion. "The door is right there." I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I simply watched her, my expression unreadable. She stared at me, clearly expecting me to beg her to stay, to try and stop her. When I didn't, her eyes widened. For a moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, a hint of genuine fear. But pride, and perhaps a desperate hope that I would still cave, won out. With a final, defiant glare, she spun on her heel, marched to the front door, yanked it open, and slammed it shut behind her. The sound echoed through the house, a definitive, terrifying finality. The silence that followed was immense. My breath hitched. She was gone. My daughter, just like that. For a long moment, I simply sat there, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the distant chirping of crickets. Was this relief? Or just another layer of pain? I picked up my book, but the words swam before my eyes. My mind reeled. Where would she go? What would she do? She had no money, no job, no real-world skills beyond scrolling social media. The harsh realities of the outside world, without a safety net, were brutal. A homeless shelter, a friend's couch, or worse, a knot of anxiety twisted in my stomach. But I held firm. I had to. This was the consequence, the natural, logical conclusion of her choices. If I went after her, if I rescued her, I would only be enabling her further. I would be confirming that my threats were empty, that my love was always unconditional, no matter how much she took. I would be dooming her to a life of dependency. And I would be dooming myself to a life of endless sacrifice and quiet despair. The days that followed were the longest of my life. The house was truly empty now. The silence was no longer heavy with tension, but with absence. I went to work, came home, and cooked for one. My garden thrived. I reread old books. But every time the phone rang, my heart leapt. Every car that drove slowly down the street, I peered out the window. My sleep was fractured, filled with anxious dreams of Stacy cold, hungry, or in danger. But the calls never came. Not from her, not from the police, not from a hospital. Just the unsettling silence, the constant not knowing. Was she safe? Was she okay? I pictured her huddled somewhere, cold and hungry. The guilt, a familiar serpent, began to coil around my heart. Had I gone too far? Had I broken her? Then, on the fourth day, I came home from my afternoon walk, the salty ocean breeze a cool balm on my face. As I approached my front door, I saw a figure hunched on the porch steps, small, defeated. My heart stopped. It was Stacy. She was curled into a ball, her knees drawn to her chest, her arms wrapped around herself. Her hair was tangled, her clothes rumpled and dirty. Her face was pale, streaked with dirt and dried tears. She looked utterly pathetic, utterly broken, not the defiant, arrogant girl who had stormed out days before, but a shadow, a hungry, humbled shadow. She looked up as she heard my footsteps. Her eyes, sunken and bloodshot, met mine. There was no anger, no resentment, no pride left, only raw, desperate hunger, and something else, something I hadn't seen in her eyes in years, vulnerability. Mom, she whispered, her voice hoarse, barely audible. I, I'm hungry. Can I have something to eat? My throat tightened. The knot of anxiety that had lived in my stomach for days finally uncoiled. This wasn't a trick. This wasn't a demand. This was a plea, a genuine, desperate, raw plea from a child who had finally, painfully, faced the consequences of her choices. I looked at her, truly looked at her. Her defeat was absolute. The battle, the terrible, necessary battle, was over, and she had lost. But in her loss, there was a glimmer of hope, a chance. Come inside, Stacy, I said, my voice soft but firm. No anger, no judgment, just a quiet authority. Let's get you something to eat. She uncurled herself, slowly, painfully, and followed me into the house. The air, heavy with unspoken truths, felt different now, lighter somehow. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more lessons. But the first, hardest step had been taken. My daughter had come home, not as the demanding boomerang kid, but as a humbled, hungry soul, finally ready to face the music. And I, Laura, was ready to listen. The air in the kitchen that night, as Stacy sat hunched on the porch steps, was thick with more than just the scent of my cooking. It was heavy with defeat, with humility, and with a raw, undeniable hunger. Come inside, Stacy, I'd said, my voice soft but firm, devoid of anger or judgment. She followed me, a shadow of her former self, and the silence between us as I dished out a plate of simple pasta felt different. It wasn't the suffocating silence of resentment anymore. It was the quiet of a deep breath taken after a long, painful dive. Stacy ate slowly, almost ravenously, her eyes rarely meeting mine. Her gaunt face, streaked with dirt and dried tears, was a stark testament to the brutal few days she'd spent out in the world. When she finished, she pushed the plate away, a faint tremor in her hand. "Thank you, Mom," she mumbled, her voice hoarse, barely audible. That was it. No grand apologies, no promises, just a quiet acknowledgement of her immediate need and my immediate provision. But it was enough. It was a start. The next morning, the real work began, not just for me at the hospital, but for Stacy. There were no more dramatic pronouncements from me, no more strict lectures, just a quiet, unwavering expectation. I continued my routine, cooking for one, cleaning my own space, locking the doors at 11 p.m. Stacy, however, began to move differently within the house. Her room, once a disaster zone, was slowly, painstakingly brought to order. I'd hear the soft whir of the vacuum cleaner, the sloshing of laundry, the clatter of dishes being washed in the sink. Small victories, yes, but each one felt like a monumental shift. She started looking for jobs again, this time with a different kind of desperation. Not the performative, half-hearted scrolling of before, but with a quiet, grim determination. I'd hear her typing on her laptop late into the night, the faint glow illuminating her face. She bought her own bus pass, navigated the local job boards, and even dressed carefully for interviews, no longer scoffing at the practical, sensible clothes I knew she could afford with her meager savings. The rejection still came, sometimes in polite emails, sometimes with a curt, no experience. I saw the frustration in her eyes, the slump of her shoulders, but she didn't lash out. She didn't blame me. Instead, she'd sigh, take a deep breath, and open another tab on her computer. She was learning that the corporate grind was more than just a phrase. It was a reality she had to confront head on. Then, about 3 weeks after her return, she came home, her face smudged with flour, a faint aroma of coffee clinging to her hair. Her eyes, though still tired, held a spark I hadn't seen in months. "Mom," she said, almost shyly, "I got a job, part-time, at the Daily Grind down on Main Street. A coffee shop." It was a far cry from her previous aspirations of high-powered PR firms or glamorous marketing roles. But it was a job, her first real job. My heart swelled, a quiet, profound sense of relief washing over me. "That's wonderful, honey," I said, a genuine smile gracing my lips. "I'm so proud of you." Stacy started working early mornings, often leaving before I did for my hospital shift. I'd sometimes sneak into the kitchen for a cup of coffee and see her uniform laid out, freshly laundered. She'd come home exhausted, her feet aching, her voice hoarse from shouting orders over the espresso machine. But she was different. She talked about grumpy customers, about learning to make lattes, about the rude manager. She talked about work. She started contributing to groceries, small amounts at first, then more. She even cleaned the entire kitchen one Saturday morning without being asked, leaving it sparkling. "You work so hard, Mom," she'd said, wiping down the counters. "It's the least I can do." The words were simple, but they landed on my heart like a soft rain after a long drought. One evening, about 2 months into her new job, I came home from a particularly draining shift. The house was quiet, but a delicious aroma wafted from the kitchen. My eyebrows raised in surprise. I walked in to find Stacy standing at the stove, stirring a pot of something fragrant. Her hair was pulled back, her face smeared with a bit of tomato sauce, and she was actually humming. "Hey, Mom, you're home," she chirped, a genuine smile lighting up her face. "I made your favorite, chicken marsala, my favorite, the dish I hadn't made in years, knowing Stacy would always scoff at it, preferring takeout. A surge of emotion, so potent it almost brought me to my knees, washed over me. She had remembered, she had cooked. For me. We sat at the small kitchen table, the silence filled with the clinking of forks and the comforting aroma of the food. The chicken marsala wasn't perfect. A little too much garlic, maybe, but it was cooked with an effort, a thoughtfulness that transcended any culinary flaw. It was an offering, a peace treaty. When we finished, Stacy cleared the plates, then hesitated. She turned to me, her blue eyes, once clouded by entitlement, now clear and bright, though still tinged with a raw vulnerability. "Mom," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "thank you for everything, for not giving up on me, even when I was impossible, for, for letting me hit rock bottom. I needed it." My throat tightened. A profound sense of peace, deeper and more resonant than any I'd felt since Robert's passing, settled over me. It wasn't the absence of conflict, but the acceptance of a painful truth and the joy of watching a life begin to bloom anew. I reached across the table and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You're welcome, sweetie," I murmured, my own voice thick with unshed tears. "You did the hard work. You saved yourself. The empty nest, once a symbol of my lost peace, was now filled with a different kind of love, a love forged in the crucible of tough lessons, of letting go, of allowing the pain of consequences to teach what words never could. Stacy's journey wasn't over, and there would be more bumps in the road, but she was on her own path now, walking with her own strength. Years passed. Stacy continued to work at the coffee shop, saving her money, and eventually, she enrolled in community college classes, pursuing a new degree, this time in business. She was quieter, more thoughtful, and her once insatiable hunger for material possessions had been replaced by a quiet appreciation for the small victories of hard work and self-reliance. She never stopped thanking me, not with grand gestures, but with consistent effort, with shared meals, with genuine concern for my well-being. My life, too, found its rhythm. The garden flourished. My shifts at St. Jude's felt less like a burden and more like a chosen purpose. The house, once a battleground, now felt like a true home, filled with the quiet hum of two independent lives, intertwined by love, but no longer weighed down by obligation. One sunny afternoon, I sat on the porch swing, the warm breeze rustling through the leaves, a classical guitar piece playing softly from a speaker beside me. Recuerdos de la Alhambra, Robert's favorite. Stacy, now a confident young woman, came out with 2 glasses of iced tea. She sat beside me, leaning her head on my shoulder. "This is nice, Mom," she murmured, quiet. I smiled, feeling the familiar warmth of Robert's ring on my finger, a constant, comforting presence. I reached for the other ring, the one on the silver chain around my neck, and touched it. "It is," I whispered. "It really is." The silence that followed wasn't an absence of love, but an acceptance of a painful, beautiful truth. We had both fought. We had both grieved. And now we were finally at peace. The melody of the music, a song of enduring love and resilience, filled the air. It was the profound realization that sometimes the greatest act of love is to let go, allowing those we care for to stumble and learn, so they can ultimately find their own strength and walk their own path to serenity. You don't owe anyone your peace, I whispered to the quiet afternoon, a single tear rolling down my cheek, not of sorrow, but of profound gratitude and understanding, especially when that peace is the only thing left to save. It was the ultimate lesson, learned through the crucible of unimaginable pain. The true measure of love wasn't in keeping a family together at all costs, or in sacrificing oneself for another's destructive choices. It was in the strength to draw a line, to let go, to reclaim your own life, your own voice, your own power. And in that fire, I had not been consumed, but forged anew. My empty nest was now full, not with a demanding child, but with the quiet, triumphant rhythm of two independent, flourishing lives.